The cargo bay doors sealed shut with a heavy thunk, and David Wright wiped the sweat from his forehead. Another delivery completed, another manifest checked, another day deeper into space. He had been working security on the Meridian for 2 years now, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing. His scanner beeped twice, then 3 times in rapid succession. David frowned at the small device in his hand. According to the readout, there was an unauthorized life form somewhere in the bay. Probably a rat or some other stowaway creature from the mining outpost. It happened sometimes when they picked up cargo from frontier worlds. Great, David muttered, grabbing his flashlight. Just what I need before dinner. He moved between the towering crates, listening for any sound of movement. The bay was cold and quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engines. His breath formed small clouds in the recycled air. The scanner led him to a stack of mining equipment near the back corner, where the shadows were thickest. Something small darted behind a metal container. David caught just a glimpse of scales that shimmered like oil on water, reflecting purple and blue in his flashlight beam. His heart jumped. That was no rat. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down. "I'm not going to hurt you." A tiny whimper came from behind the container. David set his flashlight on the floor and slowly reached around the metal box. His fingers touched something warm and fragile. The creature flinched but didn't run. When David carefully pulled his hand back, a small dragon sat in his palm that IT was barely bigger than his fist. Paper-thin wings hung limply at its sides, and its ribs showed through translucent scales. Big eyes, far too large for its head, stared up at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The dragon's whole body trembled. "Oh no," David whispered. "What happened to you, little one?" The dragon made a soft, peeping sound and pressed closer to his palm, seeking warmth. David could feel its rapid heartbeat against his skin. Without thinking, he pulled off his jacket and wrapped the creature gently inside it. Holding it close to his chest, he ran through the ship's corridors, ignoring the surprised looks from crew members. The medical bay doors slid open, and he nearly collided with Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who was organizing supplies. "David, what?" Yuki began but stopped when she saw the bundle in his arms. "I found it in the cargo bay," David said quickly. "It's hurt or sick or something. Can you help?" Yuki's eyes widened as she carefully unwrapped the jacket. "Is that a draconite?" "A what?" "Hold on." Yuki rushed to her computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Images and text filled the screen. She read silently for a moment, then looked back at the dragon with something like awe on her face. "David, these creatures are supposed to be extinct." "Well, this one isn't," David said, looking down at the small form in his arms. The dragon had stopped trembling and was watching him with those enormous eyes. Yuki explained while she prepared a medical scanner. Draconites came from a world that had been destroyed decades ago when its sun expanded. They were empathic creatures, highly intelligent, and deeply loyal. Before the extinction, they had been beloved companions across many worlds. But their rarity had made them targets for poachers who sold them to collectors for obscene amounts of money. "This baby probably escaped from smugglers," Yuki said, running the scanner over the dragon. "It's severely malnourished and dehydrated. A few more days, and it wouldn't have made it." David felt anger rising in his chest. What kind of person would do this to something so small? "The kind who sees profit instead of life," Yuki said quietly. She prepared a small syringe with nutrients. "This will help, but it's going to need constant care for the next few days. Frequent small meals, warmth, and most importantly, it needs to feel safe. Draconites can literally die from stress." "I'll take care of it," David said immediately. Yuki smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that. But you should know something. Draconites bond with one person. Once that bond forms, it's for life. This little one has already chosen you." As if to prove her point, the dragon chirped and pressed its tiny head against David's thumb. He felt something warm bloom in his chest, a connection he couldn't explain in words. Captain Brell arrived shortly after, summoned by Yuki. The old Centauri looked at the dragon for a long moment, his expression unreadable. David tensed, ready to argue if the captain ordered the creature removed from the ship. Instead, Brel reached out one long finger and gently stroked the dragon's head. The creature purred, a sound like distant thunder. "My grandmother once had a draconite companion," the captain said softly. "She said it was the truest friend she ever had. Take good care of this one, David. Such innocence is rare in this galaxy." "Yes, sir," David said, relief flooding through him. That night, David set up a corner of his quarters with heating lamps, soft blankets, and a small dish of the special food Yuki had prepared. The dragon ate slowly from his hand, watching him with complete trust. When it finished, David placed it gently in the nest he'd made. The dragon immediately began crying, a heartbreaking sound that echoed off the metal walls. David tried everything, but nothing would calm it down. Finally, exhausted, he lay down on his bunk, still in his uniform. The crying stopped. David heard a soft scrambling sound, then felt tiny claws on his back. The dragon climbed up between his shoulder blades, circled 3 times, and settled down with a contented sigh. The weight was barely noticeable, but the warmth was real. David smiled into his pillow and closed his eyes. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed forever. 5 days had passed since David found the dragon, and the entire ship seemed lighter somehow. The creature, which everyone now called Pip because of its constant peeping sounds, had recovered much of its strength. Its scales had begun to shine properly, shifting between purple and deep blue depending on the light. The ribs no longer showed through its skin, and its wings could fold properly against its body. But Pip refused to eat unless David held the food. Dr. Yuki had tried 3 times to feed the dragon while David was on duty. Each time, Pip had simply turned its head away and cried until David returned. The ship's cook, Grant, had even prepared special meals with expensive ingredients, thinking maybe Pip was picky. The dragon wouldn't touch them unless they came from David's hand. "It's definitely bonded to you," Yuki said, watching David feed Pip small pieces of prepared meat. "I've been reading everything I can find about draconites. Once they choose their person, that's it. No one else really matters to them." David felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a strange pride. Something so rare and precious had chosen him. Not the captain, not the doctor, not anyone else. Him. The crew had started finding excuses to visit David during his shifts. Chief Engineer Otto Silva claimed he needed David's signature on maintenance forms that definitely didn't require signatures. The navigator, a quiet woman named Lynn, suddenly remembered questions about security protocols she'd followed perfectly for months. Even the first mate, Dren, a massive Centauri who usually kept to himself, had stopped by David's station twice to discuss absolutely nothing important. They all wanted to see Pip. David didn't mind. He'd catch them sneaking glances at the dragon, and their faces would soften in ways he'd never seen before. Hard-bitten spacers who'd seen combat and loss would smile like children when Pip chirped at them. Mora, the ship's biologist with her 4 arms and serious demeanor, had actually giggled when Pip sneezed a tiny puff of smoke. The biggest change came at night. David had tried repeatedly to get Pip to sleep in the comfortable nest he'd built. He'd added softer blankets, adjusted the temperature, even played quiet music that Yuki said draconites found soothing. Nothing worked. The moment David placed Pip in the nest and stepped away, the crying would start. But if David lay down on his bunk, Pip would climb up his back, settle between his shoulder blades, and fall asleep instantly. David had gotten used to sleeping on his stomach, and honestly, he didn't mind anymore. The warm weight of the small dragon felt right somehow. Like a missing piece he hadn't known was gone. One morning, Otto showed up at David's quarters earlier than usual. David answered the door still half asleep, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Sorry to bother you," Otto said, holding a data pad. "I need to check the environmental controls in here. Won't take long." David waved him in and sat down at his small desk, rubbing his eyes. He'd forgotten Pip was still asleep on his back. The dragon had grown comfortable enough that it stayed put even when David moved around, adjusting its grip slightly, but not waking up. Otto stared. His mouth opened and closed without sound. Very slowly, he pulled out his personal communicator and took a photo. David heard the soft click and turned around. Everyone needs to see this, Otto said, his voice thick with emotion. David, do you have any idea how adorable that is? Within an hour, the photo had spread through the entire ship. David's communicator buzzed constantly with messages from crew members he barely knew. Most of them just said things like, "I can't handle this," or "my heart," or strings of emoji that were supposed to represent crying. During the afternoon crew meeting, David gave his security report with Pip nestled on his back, tiny wings spread slightly for balance. He tried to act professional, discussing patrol schedules and equipment maintenance. But he noticed Captain Brell's voice crack slightly when he thanked David for the report. After the meeting, several crew members approached David with unusual requests. Could they take a photo with Pip? Would Pip mind if they gently touched its scales? Did David think Pip would like a toy they'd made in the workshop? David found himself playing intermediary between the dragon and an entire ship full of grown adults who'd apparently lost all composure. Pip seemed to enjoy the attention, chirping happily and showing off by doing little hops on David's shoulders. The dragon's empathic abilities meant it could feel everyone's affection, and that feeling seemed to make it even more cheerful. That evening, Dren stopped David in the corridor outside the mess hall. The first mate looked embarrassed, his blue-tinted skin darkening slightly. "I've served on ships for 40 years, Dren said quietly. "I've seen nebulas being born. I've watched stars die. I've met beings from 1,000 worlds. But I've never seen anything as pure as that dragon choosing you as its safe place." David didn't know what to say. Dren patted his shoulder carefully, avoiding Pip, and walked away. David stood in the empty corridor, feeling the gentle rise and fall of Pip's breathing against his back. Grint had left a covered plate outside David's door when he returned to his quarters. Under the lid was a perfectly cooked meal with a small side dish of treats specially prepared for Pip. A note sat beside the plate. "Don't tell anyone I'm going soft. The dragon deserves the best." David smiled and brought the food inside. He sat on his bunk and shared dinner with Pip, the dragon eating from his palm while making happy little sounds. Through the small window in his quarters, stars streaked past as the Meridian traveled through hyperspace toward their next destination. Pip finished eating and immediately climbed back to its favorite spot on David's back. Within minutes, the dragon was asleep, tiny claws holding gently to David's shirt, wings wrapped around his shoulders like a hug. David lay down carefully and closed his eyes, knowing he'd never sleep alone again. And that was perfectly fine with him. The distress signal came through at 0600 hours, jolting everyone from their morning routines. David was in the shower when the ship's alert system blared to life. He scrambled to dry off and get dressed, while Pip chittered nervously from where it perched on the bathroom counter. "It's okay," David said, pulling on his uniform. "Probably just routine." But the tight feeling in his stomach said otherwise. Pip climbed onto his back as he rushed to the bridge, tiny claws gripping his shirt a bit harder than usual. The dragon could sense his worry through their bond. The bridge was already crowded when David arrived. On the main screen, a sleek yacht drifted against the black backdrop of space. It looked expensive, the kind of ship owned by wealthy travelers who like to show off. "They're claiming engine failure," Captain Brell said, his expression troubled, requesting immediate assistance. David studied the yacht through the view screen. Something felt wrong. The ship's running lights were active, which meant it had power. The hull showed no damage from asteroid strikes or weapons fire. It sat perfectly stable, not listing or tumbling like a vessel with actual engine problems would. "Sir," David said carefully, "I recommend caution." "Agreed," Brell said, "but we can't ignore a distress call. Dren, scan that ship. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The first mate worked his console quickly, and his face darkened as the results came through. "Captain, I'm reading at least 12 life forms on that vessel. That's far too many for a yacht that size. And I'm picking up weapons signatures that aren't legal in Coalition space." Before anyone could respond, the yacht's airlocks burst open. Boarding tubes shot across the gap between ships and clamped onto the Meridian's hull with heavy thuds that echoed through the entire vessel. "Battle stations," Burrell shouted. David's training kicked in instantly. He pulled his stun weapon from its holster and moved to cover the bridge entrance. Behind him, Pip pressed flat against his back, trying to make itself as small as possible. The dragon's fear pulsed through their bond, making David's protective instincts surge. The intruders came through fast and organized. They wore black armor with no identifying marks, carrying weapons that were definitely not legal. David counted 8 of them in the first wave, spreading through the ship's corridors with practiced efficiency. Their leader pushed onto the bridge last. He was Vaxen, a species known for their ruthlessness in business and their complete lack of empathy. His scaled face twisted into a smile that showed too many teeth. "Good morning," the Vaxen said pleasantly. "My name is Kron. You have something that belongs to me, and I've come to collect it." "We're a cargo vessel," Brell said, his voice steady despite the weapons pointed at him. "I don't know what you think we have." Kron laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Don't play foolish with me, Captain. The Draconite hatchling, the one your security officer, is currently hiding under his shirt." Every eye turned to David. He felt Pip trembling against his back, the dragon's terror bleeding into him through their bond. David's hand tightened on his weapon. "I don't know what you're talking about," David said. "Really?" Kron pulled out a small scanner and pointed it at David. The device beeped enthusiastically. "My equipment says otherwise. That hatchling escaped from my facility on Tellus 3 weeks ago. Do you have any idea how much money I've lost because of that creature? Draconite eggs sell for 5 million credits each. A bonded adult is worth 20 million. It's a living being," David said, his voice hard. "Not property." Kron shrugged. "Legally speaking, I own it. The creature hatched in my facility from an egg I paid for. Therefore, it belongs to me. You're actually committing theft by keeping it." Captain Brell stepped forward. "Those laws were written before Draconites became endangered. The Coalition has new protections in place for rare species. You have no legal claim to that dragon." "Then I guess we'll have to handle this outside the law," Kron said. He gestured to his soldiers. "Take the security officer alive. Kill anyone who gets in the way." 2 soldiers moved toward David. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Otto appeared from a side corridor and tackled one of them. The engineer might have been middle-aged, but years of physical labor had kept him strong. He and the soldier crashed into a console in a tangle of limbs. Chaos erupted on the bridge. Yuki grabbed a medical tray and slammed it into another soldier's helmet. Lin ducked under a weapon swing and kicked out the attacker's knee. Mori used all 4 arms to grapple with a soldier twice her size, her biologist training giving way to pure protective fury. David ran. Not because he was afraid, but because Pip's safety mattered more than his pride. He needed to lead the soldiers away from the crew, away from anyone who might get hurt trying to protect him and the dragon. He sprinted through the corridors, hearing heavy boots pounding behind him. Pip clung to his back, silent now, understanding somehow that noise would give them away. David's mind raced, trying to remember the ship's layout, looking for anywhere they could hide or make a stand. A stunned blast hit the wall beside his head, scorching the metal. Another shot missed by inches. David dove around a corner and kept running, his breath coming in gasps, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could feel Pip's small heart beating against his back, fast and terrified. Through their bond, David felt the dragon's absolute trust that he would protect it. That trust gave him strength he didn't know he had. "I won't let them take you," David promised, though he had no idea how he'd keep that promise. "I swear it." Pip chirped once, very softly, and pressed closer to his back. Somehow, despite everything, the dragon still felt safest right there between his shoulder blades. Even with armed poachers hunting them through the ship, even facing capture or worse, that tiny dragon trusted him completely. David wouldn't let that trust be misplaced. David's lungs burned as he ran through the engineering section, dodging between massive machines that hummed and thrummed with power. 2 soldiers were still behind him, their footsteps echoing off the metal floors. He needed a plan, needed something better than just running until he collapsed. Pip suddenly went rigid on his back. David felt a strange warmth spreading from where the dragon pressed against him. The warmth grew hotter, almost uncomfortable, and then Pip made a sound David had never heard before. It was deeper than the usual chirps and peeps, more like a growl that vibrated through his whole body. One of the soldiers rounded a corner and raised his weapon. David saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Time seemed to slow down. David couldn't dodge, couldn't do anything but watch the weapon fire. A shield of shimmering energy burst into existence around him. The stun blast hit the shield and scattered harmlessly into sparks. David stood frozen in shock. The shield pulsed with the same purple-blue color as Pip's scales, and he could feel the dragon straining with effort on his back. The soldier fired again. Again, the shield held. But David felt Pip trembling with exhaustion. Whatever the dragon was doing, it couldn't keep it up much longer. The hatchling was still too young, too weak, pushing itself beyond its limits to protect him. "Stop!" David shouted at the soldiers. "You're hurting it." The soldiers didn't care. They kept firing, trying to overwhelm the shield. David heard Pip make a small, pained sound, and rage exploded through him. These people had starved this dragon, had treated it like merchandise, and now they were hurting it again. David grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby toolbox and threw it. His aim was terrible, but luck was on his side. The wrench hit one soldier's helmet with a loud clang, and the man stumbled backward into his partner. Both went down in a heap. David ran again, this time toward the cargo bay. The shield flickered and died as Pip's strength gave out. The dragon went limp on his back, breathing in short, desperate gasps. David could feel its heartbeat racing too fast. "Stay with me," David whispered. "Please stay with me." He burst into the cargo bay and nearly collided with Mora. The Tellian biologist grabbed his arm with two hands while the other two held what looked like a homemade weapon cobbled together from spare parts. "This way," she said, pulling him behind a stack of cargo containers. "Otto's been sabotaging their boarding tubes. We're cutting them off from their ship." "Pip used some kind of shield," David said, his words tumbling out. "It protected us, but now the dragon won't move." "Is it dying?" Mora gently touched Pip's small head with one careful finger. The dragon's eyes opened slightly, and it chirped weakly. "Not dying, just exhausted. Draconites have defensive abilities, but a hatchling this young shouldn't be able to create shields at all. The bond between you must be incredibly strong." An explosion rocked the ship. Mora's communicator crackled to life. "That's the last boarding tube." Otto's voice came through. "They can't retreat to their ship now. They can't escape," David said, "but they're still here, still trying to take Pip. Then we make sure they regret ever boarding this ship," Mora said, and her usually kind face looked fierce. "No one threatens our family." They moved through the cargo bay, meeting up with other crew members who'd armed themselves with whatever they could find. Grant had a plasma cutter that was definitely being used against safety regulations. Lynn carried a fire extinguisher like a club. Even the ship's accountant, a nervous man named Paul who usually avoided any kind of conflict, held a stun rod with determination in his eyes. David heard footsteps approaching from multiple directions. The soldiers were coordinating now, boxing them in. He looked down at his makeshift team, these people who were risking everything for him and Pip. "I can surrender," David said quietly. "Give them what they want. You shouldn't have to fight for us." Grant spat on the floor. "Shut up, kid. That dragon is crew. We don't abandon crew." "The Rogosian is right." Dren's voice boomed as the first mate emerged from behind a container, looking battered but unbroken. "Every person on this ship would fight to protect that hatchling." "Do you know why?" David shook his head. "Because watching that dragon choose your back as its safe place, seeing something so small trust so completely, reminded us why we're out here," Dren said. "Space is cold and empty and often cruel. But sometimes you find something pure, something worth protecting. That's what Pip is. That's what you and Pip together represent. Hope." The soldiers burst into the cargo bay from 3 entrances at once. The crew didn't hesitate. They fought with the desperation of people defending their home, their family. Grant's plasma cutter sliced through armor. Lynn's fire extinguisher sent frozen foam everywhere, blinding the attackers. Mora moved like a whirlwind, her 4 arms a blur. David stayed in the center, protecting Pip, watching his crew fight for them. The dragon's presence seemed to strengthen everyone, its empathic abilities creating invisible threads between all of them. They moved together, anticipated each other's actions, fought as one organism with one purpose. Kron appeared at the main entrance, his weapon pointed directly at David. "Enough," the Vaxen shouted. "Everyone stop, or I shoot the human." The crew froze. Kron smiled his terrible smile and walked forward. "Smart choice. Now, hand over the hatchling, and I'll leave peacefully. Keep it, and I start killing people one by one until you change your mind." David felt Pip stirring on his back. The dragon was waking up, its strength slowly returning. Through their bond, David felt something else too. Not fear this time. Anger. Pip was angry at these people for hurting its chosen person, for threatening its family. The dragon's scales began to glow with inner light, growing brighter with each second. The glow spread outward, touching each crew member, and David felt their determination surge to impossible levels. "We're not giving you anything." Captain Brell's voice came over the intercom. "And by the way, Coalition patrol ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They received our distress signal. Surrender now, or face military justice." Kron's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this." But the soldiers were already lowering their weapons, knowing they were beaten. The Coalition soldiers moved through the meridian with practiced efficiency, securing Kron's people one by one. David sat on a cargo crate, exhausted and shaking with adrenaline, while Pip dozed fitfully on his back. The dragon kept making small distress sounds in its sleep, reliving the fear and chaos. Dr. Yuki checked them both over, her scanner moving across Pip's small form. The hatchling pushed itself too hard, creating that shield. It needs rest, lots of water, and probably twice the normal food intake for the next few days. But it'll be fine. "And David?" Captain Brell asked, standing nearby with his arms crossed. "Minor bruises, elevated heart rate, signs of stress. Nothing that rest won't fix," Yuki said. She put a hand on David's shoulder. "You did well. Kept Pip safe." David nodded, too tired to speak. He watched Coalition soldiers escort Kron past the cargo bay entrance. The Vaxen caught sight of David and lunged against his restraints, his face twisted with fury. "That dragon is mine. I paid for its egg. I raised it. You have no right. You starved it," David interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "You locked it in a cage. You were going to sell it like an object. That's not raising something. That's imprisonment." Kron snarled, but the soldiers dragged him away before he could respond. The yacht that had brought the poachers was being towed away by a Coalition ship, its cargo holds being searched for evidence that a Coalition inspector came aboard an hour later. Her name was Rachel Odom, a tired-looking woman with gray streaks in her hair and a datapad that never left her hands. She took statements from each crew member, her expression growing softer with each story. When she reached David, Pip had woken up and was nibbling on small pieces of food from his hand. The dragon still refused to eat unless David held the food, even though Yuki was right there offering to help. "Tell me about the shield," Rachel said, watching Pip with fascination. David explained what had happened, how Pip had protected him despite being just a hatchling, how the dragon had exhausted itself to keep him safe. Rachel nodded, making notes, but her attention kept drifting to Pip. "May I?" she asked, reaching out slowly. David nodded. Rachel gently stroked Pip's head with one finger. The dragon chirped and leaned into the touch, clearly enjoying the attention. Then Pip yawned, showing tiny sharp teeth, and immediately climbed back to its favorite spot on David's back. Rachel smiled, and David saw her eyes getting misty. "Sorry," she said, wiping at her face. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen trafficking operations, fighting rings, all kinds of horrible things done to creatures that can't defend themselves. But I've never seen something this pure." She closed her datapad and sat down on the crate beside David. "You know what Kron said is partially true. He did pay for Pip's egg from another poacher. Under some interpretations of salvage law, he could claim ownership." David's heart sank. "You're taking Pip." "I didn't finish," Rachel said gently. "I could interpret the law that way, or I could interpret it another way. Draconites are a protected species now. Any claims of ownership made before the protection laws went into effect are void. Kron has no legal right to Pip, and neither does anyone else who might claim to have bought or sold draconite eggs in the past. So Pip is free? David asked, hardly daring to hope. Pip is free, Rachel confirmed. Which brings us to the next question. What happens to a free draconite hatchling that can't survive in the wild? There are sanctuaries, Yuki offered, protected worlds where rescued draconites live in natural habitats. Rachel nodded. There's one in the Kepler system. Beautiful place, lots of space, other draconites for Pip to socialize with. I can arrange transport if you'd like. David felt like his heart was being squeezed. He thought about Pip playing with other dragons, flying free under open skies, living the life it deserved. Then he felt the small weight on his back, the gentle breathing, the absolute trust that radiated through their bond. Would it be better for Pip? David asked. The sanctuary? Honestly, Rachel pulled up images on her datapad. Normally, yes. Draconites are social creatures. They need space to fly, to hunt, to be with their own kind. But Pip has bonded with you deeper than I've ever seen documented. Separating bonded pairs can be traumatic for both parties. She showed him videos of young draconites in the sanctuary, playing and flying together. They looked healthy and happy. David watched, tried to imagine Pip among them, trying to convince himself it would be the right choice. Pip stirred on his back. The dragon lifted its head and looked at the datapad screen, watching the other dragons for a moment. Then Pip chirped, climbed up to David's shoulder, and pressed its face against his neck. The message was clear. This is home. I want to keep Pip, David said, the words coming out stronger than he expected. If that's allowed. If it's what's best. Rachel smiled. There's an old Earth saying, home is where the heart is. For Pip, home is clearly right there on your back. I'm authorized to approve private guardianship in cases where the bond is this strong. She pulled up a form on her datapad. I'll need your signature, and there will be regular check-ins to ensure Pip is healthy and well cared for. But yes, you can keep your dragon. David signed the forms with shaking hands. Pip climbed back to its favorite spot and immediately fell asleep, exhausted from the day's events. Rachel finished her paperwork and stood to leave. Take care of each other, she said. What you two have is special. Don't take it for granted. After Rachel left, the crew gathered in the cargo bay. Captain Brell raised a glass of synthesized wine and cleared his throat. To Pip, our newest crew member, and to David, who showed us all what it means to protect something precious. To Pip, everyone chorused. David felt tears stinging his eyes as his crew, his family, celebrated around him. Pip slept through the whole thing, safe and warm on David's back, exactly where the dragon belonged. 3 weeks had passed since the attack, and life on the Meridian had found a new rhythm. Pip had grown noticeably larger, now about the size of small cat instead of fist. The dragon's wings had strengthened enough for short flights around David's quarters, though Pip still preferred riding on David's back to any other form of transportation. Otto had spent his free time designing a special harness that let Pip ride safely during David's duty shifts. The contraption was part saddle, part safety belt, with clips that attached to David's uniform. Pip could now sleep, eat, or even play while David went about his work, and the dragon seemed delighted with the arrangement. The crew had fully embraced their unusual member. Grant prepared special meals for Pip every day, though he still pretended to grumble about the extra work. Mora had created a nutrition and exercise plan to ensure Pip grew healthy and strong. Lynn had taught the dragon a trick where Pip would fly to different crew members on command, bringing them small objects like data chips or tools. But Pip always returned to David's back. Always, David stood in his quarters, packing his belongings into storage containers. The Meridian was heading to a major station for scheduled maintenance, which meant 3 weeks of shore leave for the crew. Most people were excited about sleeping on a planet again, eating fresh food, breathing unrecycled air. David had received messages from several sanctuaries offering to let him and Pip visit. They wanted to see the bonded pair that everyone in Coalition space was talking about. The story had spread quickly. Something about a tiny dragon and a human security officer had captured people's imagination. What do you think? David asked, holding up 2 shirts. Blue or green? Pip perched on the bed, chirped and pointed with one claw at the blue shirt. David smiled and packed it. The dragon had opinions about everything lately and wasn't shy about sharing them, but a knock came at the door. Captain Brell entered, looking more relaxed than David had seen him in months. The old Centauri sat down in David's desk chair with a slight groan. "Getting too old for space travel," Brell said. "My daughter keeps asking me to retire. Come live near her family on Centauri Prime." "Are you thinking about it?" David asked. "Every day." Brell smiled. "But not yet. I've got a few more runs in me." He watched Pip hop from the bed to David's shoulder, then settle on his back with familiar ease. "I wanted to talk to you about something. There's been interest from multiple shipping companies. They want to hire you and Pip." David stopped packing. "What?" "Apparently, a security officer with an empathic dragon is highly valuable. Pip can sense danger, detect lies, feel hostile intentions. Several corporations have offered significant money for your services." Brell pulled out a datapad. "This one is offering triple your current salary." David looked at the numbers on the screen. It was more money than he'd ever imagined making. Enough to buy a house on a nice planet. Enough to ensure Pip had everything a dragon could want. "What do you think I should do?" David asked. Brell set down the datapad. "I think you should do whatever makes you and Pip happy. But I'll tell you this. The Meridian isn't fancy. We don't have the best equipment or the highest pay. We're just a cargo ship hauling supplies to places that need them. But we're family. Everyone on this ship would fight for you and that dragon without hesitation. Can those corporations say the same?" David thought about the photo Otto had taken, the one that had spread through the ship. He thought about Grint's special meals, Mora's care plans, Lynn's patients teaching Pip tricks. He thought about how the entire crew had risked their lives fighting poachers. "I want to stay," David said. "If you'll have us." Brell smiled, the expression softening his weathered face. "I was hoping you'd say that. Pip is officially listed as our morale officer now, which means you're both permanent crew members, assuming you want to be." "We want to be," David said, and felt Pip's agreement through their bond. After Brell left, David finished packing. The station they were heading to had a park with real grass and real trees, and he wanted to take Pip there. The dragon had only ever known the metal corridors of ships and stations. It deserved to feel sunlight, to see clouds, to experience what a planet was like. The Meridian docked at the station 3 days later. David walked down the ramp with Pip on his back and immediately felt a difference in the air. It was cleaner somehow, less recycled. Other ships were docked nearby, and their crews stopped to stare as David passed. "Is that the dragon?" someone whispered. "The one from the news." David kept walking, suddenly self-conscious. But Pip seemed to enjoy the attention, sitting up straighter and spreading its wings slightly to look impressive. The dragon had gotten a bit vain lately, David had noticed. The park was at the center of the station, under a massive dome that let in natural light. Real grass covered the ground, and real trees provided shade. David found a quiet spot and sat down. Pip immediately jumped off his back and started exploring, sniffing flowers and chasing insects. Other crew members from the Meridian arrived gradually. Yuki brought a picnic basket. Otto brought a ball that Pip could chase. Mora brought her camera to document Pip's growth. Even Grint showed up, pretending he'd only come because he had nothing better to do. They spent the afternoon together, watching Pip play, laughing at the dragon's antics, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together outside the ship's metal walls. David lay back in the grass, feeling the sun on his face, and Pip eventually returned to curl up on his chest. "Happy?" David asked quietly. Pip chirped and nuzzled under his chin. Through their bond, David felt pure contentment radiating from the dragon. Not because of the grass or the sun or the treats Grint had brought, but because David was there. Home wasn't a place. It wasn't a ship or a station or a planet. Home was wherever they were together. David closed his eyes, one hand resting gently on Pip's back, feeling the dragon's heartbeat matching his own. Around them, his crew, his family, laughed and talked, and simply existed in the moment. The galaxy was vast and often dangerous. But right here, right now, everything was perfect. Pip had chosen David's back as its bed, its safe place, its home. And David had chosen to protect that tiny dragon with everything he had. It was a simple bond, a simple promise, but it was everything. The crew tried not to cry at the sweetness of it all. Most of them failed, and none of them were ashamed.